Chairman, and thank you for organizing this incredibly important hearing, particularly so early in this new Congress. And to our witnesses, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for staying into this lengthy committee hearing. I do understand the serious national security threats given my background in the intelligence community. But I think that the crux of this conversation that we've had here today is not about whether we take threats seriously. It's really about whether we take the Constitution and the will of our constituents seriously as we look to how we address those threats. As a little bit of the follow-up to the conversation and the question of Congresswoman Manning, I would argue that if members of Congress do not want the responsibility of debating and voting on decisions of war and peace, the responsibility to make grave and tough decisions that affect the lives of service members and their families and many other national security professionals, then perhaps they should pursue a different profession. But I do share some bit of hopefulness that there are members of Congress across the ideological spectrum and from across the country who are really trying to reassert congressional authorities. And I look forward to our continued efforts to do so in Congress. This hearing, I think, has been vital to our understanding and to the discussion of the challenges that we're facing and how we can move forward. So my first question relates to the 2002 AUMF, and I open it up to either of you. I'm hopeful that there is bipartisan momentum to repeal the 2002 AUMF and potentially other AUMFs that are no longer active or needed. And so I guess I would start with you, Professor Hathaway. I know the 2002 AUMF has already been discussed relatively at length today, but to make sure that we're clear as we close out the hearing, could you further explain why leaving this inactive or outdated AUMF, this or others on the books, sort of just in case they would be convenient at some other point in time, why that might be a challenge or something that you would support or not support? Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think the difficulty of leaving, or the problem with leaving these defunct AUMFs on the table is that they create a lot of temptation for a president to sort of reach for them in times when they really are inappropriate to be reached for. And so, they have sort of a weak authority and they sort of think, well, maybe if I take my weak authority and I add this 2002 AUMF to it, it somehow becomes stronger, even though a legitimate reading of the 2002 AUMF is that it doesn't actually provide any additional legitimate authority for that use of force. So I think it creates unnecessary temptations. It's just best to kind of clear those decks, to kind of get those out of there. There's no serious argument that the AUMFs were meant to be used at this point for the purposes that they've been cited for in the last couple of years, and move on with a clear repeal and replace of the 2001 AUMF after that.
And sir, would you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree with that.
Thank you very much. Well, and so then when we're looking at, in addition to the challenges of outdated or the vague nature of the laws that exist on the books, I think there's an overarching challenge of congressional capacity to carry out oversight, which I think could be one of the real contributing factors here. The president has expansive legal resources, and I know, Professor Hathaway, I think you were speaking about that just a bit ago. So do you have additional recommendations about how we could better enable congressional oversight and our legislative efforts as a way of perhaps contending with this argument that there is value in keeping older AUMFs on the shelf just in case?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that part of what would be appropriate is for Congress to ask for a briefing from the executive branch about what operations it understands it to require. I suspect that what you're going to get from that is that the administration is not relying on the 2002 AUMF for any ongoing operations. It didn't cite it for the operation in Syria against the Iran-backed militias. And so I think that might give some comfort. But I think also we need to be thinking about sort of regularized reporting mechanisms and ensuring that Congress is regularly kept updated. All the appropriate committees are kept regularly updated on the operations that are being undertaken using the authorities that have been granted by Congress. And so real attention to careful thoughtful reporting, and ideally reporting that is unclassified, so that members are able to discuss it in the open, have hearings like this one about the claims that are being made, so that all the staff members can weigh in and be aware of the decision made. Maybe there'll be a classified appendix, but the vast majority of the reporting, I think, ought to be done in an unclassified way, so that the American public knows what's being done in their name.
And so that we can have those conversations with the people we represent. Certainly, I come from a classified background, but I see significant value in what you're discussing. With that, I'm over time, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again to our witnesses.
Thank you. And